Welcome back in to the Arrowhead Pride Chiefs training camp report on Wednesday, August 3rd. Day 7 of Chiefs training camp was a wet one, so the team moved inside, meaning it was not open to the public. Luckily, the only man at Arrowhead Pride who's ever cheated in a hot dog race at the K was on the ground in St. Joseph, Missouri. Let me welcome in Pete Sweeney. Pete, it was a wet one up in St. Joe.
Yeah, you always like to slide these little clips in. The cheating when I was the relish dog is alleged. I feel like I went at the start to go, but that's a conversation for another day. Yeah, we were up in St. Joe today. It was rainy up here, really right in the practice window. Like I'm up here right now, and it's fine, which probably frustrates some fans that came up to try to see practice. But they moved indoors, so no fans in attendance in a closed practice, which we estimate to be the final padded practice of the week. Usually, what Andy Reid will do is now switch to shorts for this final day on Thursday, and then he'll have a day off on Friday. So we got a final practice of pads into the week inside.
There's video proof of you cheating in the hot dog race, Pete. video evidence of your false start. But
Sure.
But so yes, practice was not open to the public today. So the updates were a little bit thin compared to what they normally are. So can you give us an update on Chiefs wide receiver Sky Moore and tight end Jody Fortson?
Yeah, Jody Fortson remains out. You know, we're I think giving him a few days out of the mix due to his quad issue, and so he is still watching on the sideline. Sky Moore, he went on his personal official Instagram and he said, "Look, I'm okay," and he was. I didn't notice any kind of issues stemming from what would have been that hip injury, and even with quarterback Patrick Mahomes a couple of days ago had that ankle thing. I think that is a small thing of the past as well. But I didn't notice any dip in, you know, if you want to say is Sky 100%, I didn't notice any different percentage when it came to Sky Moore and his performance and size. So just a little bit of a scare when it came to the rookie, but I think he's okay and he's good to go.
Yeah, and we did see some video of him taking kick return reps and stuff like that. So if it was anything serious, he wouldn't be doing that.
There was one part of practice where he had to dive for a ball and he popped right back up. So if there was any problem with the hip, you know, that could have been a problem, but popped right back up. Just seemed to be something that gave him a little bit of a discomfort on Tuesday, and now he's back in the mix now for Wednesday, and we assume moving forward.
So you already mentioned that today's probably the last padded practice from head coach Andy Reid this week, and practice moved inside. That was always, you know, when I went up to St. Joe for practices constantly covering Chiefs training camp, indoor practices were the most fun for the media because you're down there on the field and you get a closer look than you normally do for the outdoor practices. Can you talk about the atmosphere and what it was like indoors today for the Chiefs fans that didn't get to go out to St. Joe?
Yeah, you know, it's difficult to describe it. It does seem like you do have somewhat of a dip in juice, just because I think the players do draw energy from fans and attendance when, you know, they know people are watching them, and if they make a good play, you're going to hear it from the crowd. But it was more of a business-like practice, and you know, as we mentioned, when Andy Reid runs these padded practices a couple days in a row, he goes a little bit longer with the practice than maybe he would have the first 2 days. And so I thought we saw that it was a little bit longer of a workout, letting the players, in a sense, earn their day in shorts, and then we'll leave a day off from camp and the on-field practices on Friday. So it was a little bit more intense, and I am starting to feel like we're getting into the dog days at camp and approaching that area where I even felt like it got a little chippy at times. There were they were doing these stud periods, and you could see the defenders, and they were, you know, eager to make sure that the opposing offensive players didn't end up in the end zone. And so, yeah, I think we're at that part of camp where these guys are starting to want to and have this desire to hit an opposing player of another team. And we'll get that in a week's time when the Chiefs play the Chicago Bears.
No camp fights yet, right?
No camp fights, and to tell you the truth, even some of the details on the chippiness, as it turns out, you know, when you cover this in the media, you can say a little bit less when they move indoors, just because it isn't open to the public. So the media rules change a little bit, and then, so I think I could safely tell you that it was a little chippier, and we'll see if that translates to a training camp continuing, and certainly to when they get to that first preseason game.
I do want to ask you about the tight end battle that's kind of going on in Chiefs training camp, and we've talked a lot about it. We think Jody Fortson, when healthy, is absolutely locked in at the number 2 tight end, but it could mean a difference of the Chiefs winding up carrying 3 tight ends or 4 tight ends heading into the season. So, can you tell us what's going on there in the absence of Jody Fortson?
Yeah, you know what? It wasn't a position that I was eyeing ahead of camp and trying to maybe describe as one of the most strong positions on the team. But I certainly feel that way. I find that behind Jody Forson, you're seeing more opportunity for Noah Gray, who has really popped in recent days. A name like Jordan Franks, we really weren't considering for any aspect of this team, maybe including the practice squad, has looked really good these past few days. I think Matt Bushman has even had some really good reps. You're seeing Blake Bell, I think, come into his own. And so Forson has exited, and I still believe you're right. When he is healthy, he is the tight end too, but maybe there's more depth than we even realize beyond Blake Bell and Noah Gray. And so I think if you're building this 53-man roster and you're even eyeing the practice squad, I could see 1 or 2 tight ends making the practice squad. And if something were to happen to these guys up there during the regular season, the Chiefs will have some good backups so long as they don't make it to other teams. So we'll end up having to see what they put on tape in the preseason. But I think it's a developing story in the sense that tight end might be much more deeper than we realize entering camp.
Yeah, at least Blake Bell is kind of a seasoned player who's got plenty of experience in this offense and plenty of reps with the Kansas City Chiefs. But nice to hear that tight end Noah Gray in year number 2 is finally showing some flashes for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, and I would say that Gray has flashed enough these past couple days where, not that I'm saying Fortson is milking it. I'm not implying that at all. But if I'm Fortson watching these practices and seeing what Noah Gray is doing, I'm trying to leave the tub as soon as possible. And I wonder if we maybe even see him in that shorts practice that I assume is happening tomorrow.
I want to ask you about Orlando Brown Jr., who took the field for the Chiefs this week. How has he looked so far through a couple of practices now?
I regret it because I wish we would have asked him about his weight, because I wrote in my story, I think he slimmed down a bit. And in my view, just kind of thinking about how he looked last year, I could tell he's probably about 10 pounds lighter. That would be my guess. And so I think he's moving a little bit better. They had him again going on the one-on-ones today, and I think he's shaking off a little bit of the rust. It's hard to judge Brown Jr. right now, aside from what I'm saying, where he slimmed down and moving well, because I think it would be unfair to be like, okay, he's going to come for the first time since the AFC title game and look like this all-world left tackle. I think the judgment needs to be next week. I think so far so good as they are beginning to acclimate Orlando Brown. He did more than he did yesterday, today, and I anticipate that we're getting very close to Orlando Brown being able to do full team practices. I'd imagine he'll go for the full workout tomorrow.
Yeah, assuming weather allows it, you'll be able to catch him tomorrow, and Chiefs fans will be able to go check out that practice and hopefully get a glimpse of Orlando Brown and see what he's doing there as they continue to establish their offensive line throughout camp. I got to ask you about the running backs on Wednesday inside practice. This has become a camp battle that I think a lot of Chiefs fans are paying close attention to compared to some other position groups. Did you see anything from that running back group?
Yeah, I know this does impact the NFL watching world that likes fantasy football as well. So it's a point that I tweeted out yesterday that Clyde Edwards-Helaire seems to be the guy when it comes to the first reps, and behind him has varied, and it's mostly been Jared McKinnon. But in recent days, you've seen Ronald Jones get more opportunities right behind Clyde. So I do still feel like I did coming into camp. I think the locks for this 53-man roster are Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Isaiah Pacheco, the rookie who they really like for sure. And then it's how many more running backs do we keep and who are they? So if they keep 2 more, are you looking at a combination of maybe McKinnon or Jones and Derek Gore? Is Derek Gore out of that mix and they keep the 2 veterans and try to sneak Derek Gore onto the practice squad because we know they like Gore. They've complimented him in the past. And so it's an ongoing battle. And what is interesting about this particular running back battle is I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is RB1. I think Isaiah Pacheco is RB3 and is going to be the kick returner for this team. What's weird is the battle is actually for what would be the RB2 position, and that isn't a lock. And it's just one of those intricacies of football that you don't get quite often, where really the battles for the backup and number 3 is solidified. But I think that's what we have in Kansas City.
Yeah, as we move further and further along into training camp, I'm starting to talk myself into it being really hard for Ronald Jones to make this team, just because we know he's not a pass catching running back. And if Clyde is legitimately the number one running back, which I agree with you, I think that he is locked in there, even if they might split the reps a little bit more this season. It's just that Jerick McKinnon and rookie Isaiah Pacheco seem to give you a little bit more versatility than Ronald Jones does.
I think where Ronald Jones can win it would be pass pro and then short yardage and goal line. The problem is okay. So if you're maybe relying on Clyde a little bit more there and giving another opportunity to short yardage and goal line, and Jerick McKinnon is kind of your passing back, you got to be really good. I think in short yardage. And the problem comes in is, okay, if Isaiah Pacheco can be that bulldog for you at the goal line and in short yardage, and you look at Ronald Jones and you're like, well, we know that McKinnon can pass protect. Clyde's gotten better at it. Isaiah Pacheco takes a lot of pride in that. What does he do that's different from the rest of what the Chiefs have? And I think that's the $1 million question. And I don't think Ronald Jones is a player that if, say, the Chiefs waived him, he wouldn't find a role in the NFL. I think there's going to be other teams interested in this, which is why I continue to suggest that maybe he does get that Carlos Hyde treatment of that late trade. I know I've said it a couple times in the Chiefs training camp report here. But it's such a tough numbers game because you have all these talented receivers, all these talented tight ends. Them keeping 4 running backs seems a little bit less likely. And so you wonder how it all plays out.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think as we get into the preseason and we'll see these guys in action, if Ronald Jones winds up having a good preseason and the Chiefs just say, well, we need more out of that position than just a guy who can take handoffs, I do see a scenario where they could wind up trying to move him.
A perfect example is you go and play the Bears and the coaching staff sees him there. And I don't know how high they are in Montgomery. Who knows about how Herbert fits into that mix? I don't know. That feels like a team that might be able to use Jones even a little bit more than what the Chiefs have currently, just because of their depth, even going as far as Jericho or Jerry and Ely. So it's all a numbers game, and that stuff will be worked out in the preseason. But if you can move on from a player, and you're going to move on from him anyway, and you can get a draft pick out of it, we've seen Britt Beach willing to do that, and so I just wonder if it happens again.
So we know Sky Moore did return to practice today, and Andy Reid seems like that they think he's totally fine. Looked good today. Was in the mix there. But I want to talk about the rest of the wide receivers, as we're obviously paying attention to these veterans and who's going to be that next consistent playmaker for Patrick Mahomes. What did we see from those guys on Wednesday?
Yeah, I'm beginning to wonder about Josh Gordon. We've seen him with more of the second team and third team, not only what would be in today, but in recent practices, and you just wonder how the end of that position group plays out. I think everyone is in agreement in Kansas City. Anyone who covers this team, we know who the top four are: Juju, MVS, Nicole Hardman, and Sky Moore. And to me, I think they're keeping 6 receivers. The talent is too strong. And when you hear Dave Cove, who spoke yesterday, compare Justin Watson, who was able to speak today, to Marcus Kemp, who is now a member of the New York Giants. And what that equates to is the ultimate special teams guy. And when Watson is doing what he's been doing with Mahomes as far as building rapport, Fountain is a guy they've already kept over Josh Gordon. I'm less bullish on this team keeping Gordon when he's one-dimensional when it comes to playing offense, and it's what do you do for me on special teams? And you have 2 guys in Fountain and Watson who can offer you something on offense, but also offer you something on special teams. The special teams part of it is a little bit underrated of a storyline. You think about the guys that they lost in Armani Watts and Ben Neiman and Dory Daniel. They got to fill all those positions. And so to me, 2 wide receivers that stand out and have kind of emerged here are Watson and Fountain. And the case is getting made more and more and more. And so I just don't know how Josh Gordon necessarily fits into that. And who knows, maybe that is someone who does stand out in the preseason. You could be looking at another swap for someone where maybe the wide receiver room isn't as deep. A lot of things can happen as you get closer and closer to this 53-man roster.
Yeah, we talked about it a ton yesterday. I think when Dave Toub shouts out Doris Fountain in his press conference, that says a lot because we know Dave gets those bottom of the roster spots for his unit. And so I think that says a lot. And, Josh Gordon, it's just for a team that's looking to get young and fast at that position. It just seems like at this point in his career, he's probably not offering that to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Well, I think you got to wonder about Fountain. But the Dave Toub effect is real when he says, and let's go back to the running back room for a second. When he says, "Yeah, I like Chick to be our new kick returner." Remember Byron Pringle's in Chicago. So to me, Chick was on the team. And then when he says, "Well, Watson can be our next Marcus Camp," to me, Watson's on the team. And so we'll see about that sixth position. But that for me was something that I made a mental note about. I think Watson, you could almost write in what would be ink at this point to make the roster. And I wonder if Fountain can hold on to that sixth spot just because of his special teams prowess as well.
Final thing for me, Pete, we've talked a ton about the defensive side of the football, all the young playmakers, and hopefully tomorrow on Thursday, we'll get our first look at Carlos Dunlap in a Chiefs uniform on the practice field. But I want to ask you about the young defenders and what have we seen from them the last couple of days? Has anybody stood out? Has anybody really impressed you?
Yeah, you know what? I think you're seeing some action from Leo Chanel. I think in his rookie year here, during neutral plays that could be pass or run, I think you're going to see Elijah Lee in there. But I think these clear-cut run plays, think 1st and 15 or 1st and 10 at the beginning of a drive against a team that shows a tendency to run on early downs. I think you're going to see a role for Leo Chanel. And he's a pretty good run stuffer at this level. And I think they're going to let him grow into some of those other packages where he might need to drop into coverage. So I think there'll be a role for Chanel. And then when you think about cornerbacks on this team, everyone's been on Joshua Williams, but I think we're starting to see Jalen Watson emerge as a candidate to be at the front of that cornerback room as well. That was something I asked Andy Reid about. He said that the defensive backs coach Dave Merritt has been working with these guys, giving them an opportunity. And there's really good competition in that cornerback room. And like we talked about how it could be phasing Josh Gordon out, it could be phasing DeAndre Baker out of the mix. There's a lot of defensive backs on this team, a lot of young talent, and they're exploring, okay, who can play at the top level for us? Who could play what would be the outside cornerback in the base, the outside cornerback in the nickel? And I think a lot of these guys are going to get these opportunities. So there's competition and maybe one of those hidden competition battles happening when it comes to maybe that 4th or 5th cornerback as well.
Again, not really any mention of first-round cornerback Trent McDuffie, Pete.
I will say, hey, look, I've been a little hard on McDuffie. I thought he had a better look today. He's going to win by sticking with the receivers. And I think we're seeing a little bit more of that where, as pads come on and you could get a little bit chippier, you can have a little bit more contact and simply stay with the opposing receiver. I think that's where McDuffie's going to win. And I've liked these past few days more so than I did at the beginning of camp. And hopefully for Chiefs fans, he just continues to build on top of that.
He's Pete Sweeney. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at PG Sween. Make sure you check out his daily camp notebooks at arrowheadpride.com. If you want to listen to the Chiefs press conference in their entirety, you can do so on From the Podium at the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. That's available for you now. As always, please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review everything that we're doing. We will talk to you guys tomorrow for day 8 of Chiefs training camp.